very little about the details. You may have heard some of the things that I'm going to talk about. How many here know what an excitotoxin is? And this is going on in your brain if you take these excitotoxins into your body. It does the same things. There's particular cells inside of your brain that will become very excited, and they'll become excited to the point that they'll die. Because the number one source of excitotoxins in our society is in your food. And it's not in your natural food, it's being added to your food by the industry that processes food. And they're adding it in very large concentrations. And we'll see exactly what these excitotoxin substances are and the various deceiving methods they use to keep you from knowing they're there, and what they try to do to those of us who are trying to tell you they're there, and what they do to you. Now, what I have found out since I wrote this book, be prepared. And so when I wrote the book, I said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this argument so tight, so well referenced, that no one can refute it reasonably. So I spent a long time going through hundreds and hundreds of research papers, interviewing the person who coined it. So there's enormous pressure to keep this story quiet, the person who coined the term excitotoxin. And then I wrote the book. Copy did a thing on the NutraSweet and the pilots, airline pilots that were drinking NutraSweet that were having seizures. They were becoming so confused they couldn't figure out how to land their airplanes. We had one pilot that just totally could not figure out, and his co-pilot had to land the plane. There's over 600 pilots now who have come secretly to organizations to tell their stories of the problems with NutraSweet. Health food magazines generally will not touch this story because they sell these things in their health food stores and call it health food. Now, a lot of things in the health food store are fine, but they're putting some items in there that are excitotoxins. It's a big industry, and so there's a lot of pressure to keep this story quiet. In 1957, Lucas and Newhouse, two ophthalmologists, did this experiment, and what they found to their surprise was that the monosodium glutamate totally destroyed all the nerve cells in the retina of the eye, just wiped them out. Was that it not only destroyed the eye cells, but it was destroying critical parts of the brain as well. And that the parts of the brain that was being destroyed resembled some destruction we see in things like strokes, things we see with severe hypoglycemia or very low blood sugar, and like we see in diseases like Alzheimer's disease. And so he immediately realized this is something that's quite serious because this is a food ingredient. And he thought, he told me this story. He said, naively, I thought all I had to do is present the information to food manufacturers and they would take it out. And he said, to my surprise, they just totally ignored it. They said, we don't care. It doesn't make any difference. The body doesn't know how to handle that. So when you consume monosodium glutamate, your blood levels can reach 20-fold higher than normal. A brain doesn't know how to handle 20-fold higher normal monosodium glutamate. Neither does the liver, the muscles, or the other organ systems. Now, this is the neurodegenerative process, and basically this is what is the central process for all those diseases I listed about excitotoxicity. That whole long list, this is what happens. And this is similar to what happens in cancer, surprisingly, and arthritis. We're finding that everything is a central mechanism. But in the brain, there's one little difference, and that has to do with this membrane here. It has a little pore in it, a little opening, a channel. One of the ways that excitotoxins kill is by producing free radicals. Excitotoxins are very powerful free radical generators. They make these cells produce all these destructive free radicals that destroy the cell. And one of the interesting things we found out not too long ago is that it impairs the ability of glucose to enter the brain. The brain is almost totally dependent on glucose for its energy supply. Glutamate interferes with the entry of that fuel to the brain. So when you're consuming a diet high in MSG, it interferes with the ability of your brain to get the fuel it needs. Ovaries, testes, adrenal glands, kidney, spleen, pituitary, they all are smaller than normal, significantly smaller. We find that the animals were all grossly obese. And we'll talk more about this tomorrow, but the obesity is similar to what we're seeing in human society now. With this growth, we're talking about adolescent obesity. All the kids are real obese, and it's difficult to control, and a lot of the adults are finding trouble controlling their obesity. We find that it's almost impossible to diet off this type of obesity, and it's almost impossible to exercise at all, because it alters the part of the brain that has to do with obesity. Abnormal reproductive